Realities now. As you know, we are very concerned with the situation around Ukraine. What we will do, I think what I will do is really call for diplomatic settlement, diplomatic talks. As you know, France and Germany have been strongly engaged on this one. The National Security Advisors met in a Normandy format a few days ago. There will be another round in Berlin on February 10. President Macron has been talking to President Putin, President Zelensky. So we will do whatever we can to promote de-escalation. And this is very much the spirit into which I will participate this morning to this meeting, urging everyone to de-escalate, to go back to the negotiating table, to address the core issues which are on the table and to negotiate. So this is very much what I have in mind, what we have in mind.
Ambassador, do you think the majority of the Security Council think there should be a meeting today? Because Russia is talking about pushing this to a procedural vote.
I think, these are, in a way, these are little details, procedural vote, who votes, etc. I think there will be a meeting, and I think council members will speak. And I think we will be able to get our messages through. And I really hope that we can go back to the negotiating table outside of New York, of course, as soon as possible. Okay.
Thank you.
So,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Russia's very happy with the tensions. That gets them what they want. They get nothing. Are they going to call me at some point? Well, you will, but after this has started. It's fun. Yeah. Vincent, latest on thoughts about how this might happen? Consultations first or not clear?
Did I get to tell you? Maybe, would you like to come in? Yeah, I would. Welcome. Okay, right now. Thank you.
Because he said it in the moment, I got the push as well. No.
Can they call? No Russian. I'm the Secretary General. Good morning. How serious is the situation?
Good morning. How are you doing?
Nice to see you.
We just tried it like this.
I think she said nice to see you.
James.
IFP. No one is calling. I can't do it without a call. Say one's last hour. 08688. Look. He's not to come this way, is he?
Brazilian? Maybe. We never
I've not had a missed call. It's not connected at all. 0688. Is that the one they're calling? 0688 is the last four digits. 0688 is the last digit. Ambassador, good morning.
Obrigado. Bom dia. Abstention? I'm not going to get in trouble. I'm just going to keep walking.
Hello, it's James.
Well, Brazil, I don't think they will stay. They're out like
Yeah, hang on. I need to put it in my ears. It's just hang on.
No, not this Brazil. The Brazil of the ex-president.
I've got it. Got it.
Like Bolsonaro's Brazil now. Lula da Silva, yes. I think they all take that.
I didn't. I never saw him before. Yeah, no, obviously. I know. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't think he's here. I must have been.
Chris, can you tell us to sound down? Hey Rich, I'm here. I will turn and talk to camera when we're done. This will dissipate a bit because the meeting will probably start. Good morning, Ambassador.
Good morning.
Albania. China coming that way.
Oh, good. You think you can say something? Yeah.
He's very slow. Yeah, that was taken over.
He will go that way now.
Please come and talk to us, Ambassador. We're all here for you. And Jermaine. That's right, it's the year of the tiger.
The Chinese ambassador coming our way. Good morning, Ambassador. Do you support this meeting taking place today?
But before everything, I do wish to say Happy New Year, a happy Spring Festival for the Year of the Tiger. This is the New Year's Eve, and tomorrow we will be in Brown New Year, the Year of the Tiger. Wish all of you happiness, good health, prosperity, and peace.
Do you support this meeting?
Well, for China, we are against a public meeting. This is really the right time calling for quiet diplomacy with more diplomatic efforts instead of microphone diplomacy or public confrontation. And that's also the concern of many members of the Council. We all hope that with our efforts we can avoid adding fuel to the tension. And what's really needed, badly needed, is more diplomatic efforts. So that's our position.
So if there's a procedural vote, can the meeting be blocked, do you believe? Do you have the votes?
I think efforts are still being underway. As far as I know, the President of the Council, many members, including China, are all making efforts trying to avoid a public confrontation. The efforts are going on.
Ambassador, just to confirm, will you vote no or abstain?
We will vote no. As I said, what we want is quiet diplomacy. Yeah.
Can you have veto doesn't work in the procedural vote?
Good morning. The Ambassador of Norway will give a brief statement, but I'm sorry we don't have time for questions right now because the meeting is about to adjourn. Thank you.
Good morning. We will now have a meeting under the agenda item International Threat to Peace and Security, a meeting called by the U.S. In a national capacity, and Rosemary DiCarlo will brief at the meeting. In a national capacity, I would just like to say that we are concerned with the military build-up and the threat against Ukraine. This afternoon, we will have a meeting where we will adopt the mandate on UNSMIL, which is a technical rollover for 3 months. And then this is the last day of the Norwegian presidency, so I would like to thank you so much for all the good cooperation we have had with you, and we are really grateful for the work also you do in order to spread the word about the important work of the Security Council also during the Norwegian presidency. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think that the US and its allies feel that they've done a lot of work around the United Nations, around all 194 members of the United Nations, and around the Security Council, and they believe they have support now for their view that what Russia is doing is a threat to international peace and security. Also worth telling you that in 24 hours' time, the presidency of the Security Council, currently held by Norway, will be taken over by Russia. And I think they wanted to have a meeting where at least the presidency of the Security Council wasn't in the hands of Russia. Russia only has some limited sway in what it can do as president that could make this favourable to them. But I think they still felt it would be cleaner to do it during Norway's presidency. Russia does have things it can do even now before it's president. We've just seen in the last few years all the ambassadors going to the Security Council chamber. In fact, we were listening just moments ago to the president of the Security Council for this month, January, in the last day, Norway. And what looks likely is that there's going to be a procedural vote to decide whether this meeting can take place. We heard in the last couple of minutes as well from the Chinese ambassador to the United Nations. He said he will be voting with Russia. No, this meeting should not take place. His view was that this is the time for quiet diplomacy, not for big meetings in public of the Security Council. What's not clear is the dynamics around the council table of the rest of the 15 council members.
The 8,960th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is threat to international peace and security. The agenda is, I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the Russian Federation is asking for a procedural vote on the proposal to hold this meeting on the initiative of the United States. The delegation of the U.S., in explaining its proposal on convening this meeting, has pointed out that it considers the deployment of Russian troops within Russian territory as a threat to international peace and security. This is not only unacceptable interference in the domestic affairs of our state, but also an attempt to mislead the international community on the situation in the region and also the reason for the current global tensions. We are being asked to convene a Security Council meeting on unfounded accusations that we have refuted frequently. Furthermore, we frequently refuted, consistently refuted. Furthermore, the open format for discussion proposed by the US on this extremely sensitive topic is making this a classic example of megaphone diplomacy and working in public for the public, rather. There's a need to review this, and we've all stated this frequently. We do not think that this will help to bring this council together. Rather, we fully understand that the desire of our American colleagues to whip up hysterics regarding its own situations, regarding the so-called Russian act of aggression, is something that they want to do, including within the Security Council from this rostrum. Our Security Council colleagues are being put in an extremely difficult position. This is of great harm, this hysterica, to Ukraine itself. The president of which, as we've seen, has asked Western countries a few days ago not to whip up hysterics regarding the deployment of Russian troops near the border, since this all harms the Ukrainian economy. We do not need this panic, said President Zelensky. Rather, this is needed for those people who believe in the myth of the Russian aggression. The Ukrainian officials have talked about a lack of a threat from Russia. In particular, this pertains to the Minister of Defense, the President himself, Mr. Zelensky, who have said themselves that they do not see in this activity that we are being talked about today as a threat. We are prepared to disseminate this to you later. We would urge all colleagues to not use the rostrum of the Security Council to push forward the propaganda beliefs of our colleagues. We would also like to remind members of the Security Council that the Russian delegation in December announced its plans to have an annual discussion of the situation in Ukraine during our presidency of the Council that starts from tomorrow. The 7th anniversary of the adoption of the package of measures of the Minsk agreements will be an excellent opportunity for us to constructively show the Security Council's commitment to 2202 that is the international basis for the Ukrainian settlement. The event is planned for the 17th of February. If our American colleagues really need to say in public any additional information about this, they can fully do this during the planned meeting in February. We would urge all sensible members of the Council not to support this provocative proposal and treat the UN Charter with respect. Thank you.
The representative of the Russian Federation, I give the floor to the representative of the US.
Thank Thank you very much, Madam President. As our colleague stated, we have called for this meeting, and we've called for this meeting because of what we have all witnessed over the course of the past few months in terms of the actions of the Russian Federation on the territory on the border with Ukraine. They indicate that it's in their own territory, but it is also very close to their neighbor's border. It's a neighbor that has been invaded already before. It's a neighbor that has Russian troops occupying their territory. We have had numerous meetings, over 100 meetings over the course of the past few weeks, both with Russian officials and in consultations with our European and Ukrainian colleagues. All of these meetings have been in private. We think it's now time to have a meeting in public and have this discussed in a public forum. We have worked with the Ukrainians at their request to provide assistance to them so that they can prepare for what they see as inevitable, including having provided $200 million in assistance in recent weeks and over $5 billion in assistance since 2014. And that is so that they can be prepared. You've heard from our Russian colleagues that we're calling for this meeting to make you all feel uncomfortable. Imagine how uncomfortable you would be if you had 100,000 troops sitting on your border in the way that these troops are sitting on the border with Ukraine. For us, this is about peace and security. It's about honoring the UN Charter that calls on us as members of the Security Council to protect peace and security. So this is not about antics. It's not about rhetoric. It's not about U.S. and Russia. What this is about is the peace and security of one of our member states. Thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States. In view of the request and the comments made by members of the Security Council, I intend to put the provisional agenda to a vote. Accordingly, I shall put it to the vote now. Will those in favor of the adoption of the provisional agenda please raise their hand? Those against? Abstention? The result of the voting is as follows. 10 votes in favor, 2 votes against, 3 abstentions. The provisional agenda has been adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Belarus, Lithuania, Poland, and Ukraine to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, to participate in the meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. Recalling the Security Council latest note 507 on its working methods, I wish to encourage all speakers, both members and non-members of the Council, to deliver their statements in 5 minutes or less. Note 507 also encouraged briefers to be succinct and to focus on key issues. In this spirit, briefers are further encouraged to limit their initial remarks to 7 to 10 minutes. Everyone is also encouraged to wear a mask at all times, including while delivering remarks. I now give the floor to Rosemary DiCarlo.
Thank you. Madam President, the United Nations is closely following the ongoing diplomatic discussions on the future of European peace and security architecture among representatives of the Russian Federation, the United States, members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the European Union, and the Organization for the Security and Cooperation in Europe. We hope the outcome of these talks will strengthen peace and security in Europe, including for Ukraine. Madam President, although not an active participant in these exchanges, in all his contacts, the Secretary General has unequivocally supported the ongoing diplomatic efforts at all levels. Still, we remain greatly concerned that, even as these efforts continue, tensions keep escalating and a dangerous military buildup is in the heart of Europe. It is reported that over 100,000 troops and heavy weaponry from the Russian Federation are positioned along the border with Ukraine. Unspecified numbers of Russian troops and weaponry are also reportedly being deployed to Belarus ahead of large-scale joint military exercises in February on the borders with Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic states. NATO members are reportedly planning additional deployments in Eastern European member states, and NATO has advised that 8,500 troops are now on high alert. Accusations and recriminations among the various actors involved in the ongoing discussions have created uncertainty and apprehension for many that a military confrontation is impending. Madam President, the Secretary General has made clear that there can be no alternative to diplomacy and dialogue to deal with the complex, long-standing security concerns and threat perceptions that have been raised. He has expressed his strong belief that there should not be any military intervention in this context and that diplomacy should prevail. He's been equally explicit that any such intervention by one country in another would be against international law and the United Nations Charter. His expectation is that we all contribute to avoiding confrontation and to creating conditions for a diplomatic solution to end this crisis. We therefore welcome the steps taken so far by all involved to maintain dialogue. We urge and expect all actors to build on these efforts and to remain focused on pursuing diplomatic solutions by engaging in good faith. We further urge all actors to refrain from provocative rhetoric and actions to maximize the chance for diplomacy to succeed. Achieving mutual understanding and lasting, mutually acceptable arrangements is the best way to safeguard regional and international peace and security in the interest of all. Madam President, let me repeat the full commitment of the United Nations to the sovereignty, political independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, in accordance with relevant General Assembly resolutions. It is important, especially at this time, for the international community to intensify its support for the efforts of the Normandy 4 and of the OSCE-led Trilateral Contact Group to ensure the implementation of the Minsk Agreements endorsed by this Council in its Resolution 2202. We welcome the recent meeting of the Normandy 4 advisors in Paris and their agreement to reconvene shortly in Berlin as another sign that diplomacy can work. We commend these efforts and those of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. Likewise, United Nations agencies in Ukraine are committed to continue delivering on their mandates in accordance with the humanitarian principles of neutrality, impartiality, humanity, and independence. Safe, unimpeded humanitarian access must be respected under any circumstances to provide support to the 2.9 million people in need of assistance, with the majority in non-government controlled areas. In this regard, I encourage member states to contribute to the humanitarian response plan. Further, the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine continues to document civilian casualties in the conflict area. Madam President, no one is watching the current diplomatic efforts more than the people of Ukraine. They have endured a conflict that has taken over 14,000 lives since 2014, and that tragically is still far from resolution. It is painfully obvious that any new escalation in or around Ukraine would mean more needless killing and destruction. Whatever one's position regarding the current situation or the status quo in eastern Ukraine, this should be inconceivable. The fact that it is not should give us pause. The principles enshrined in the UN Charter, the Helsinki Final Act, and multiple other commitments to safeguard regional and international peace and security are crystal clear. Any escalation or new conflict would deal another serious blow to the architecture so painstakingly built up over the last 75 years to maintain international peace and security just when we need it most. Once again, I'd like to stress the Secretary General's appeal to all concerned to take immediate steps to de-escalate tensions and continue on the diplomatic path. The United Nations stands ready to support all efforts to that end. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Undersecretary General DiCarlo, for your briefing. Colleagues, the situation we're facing in Europe is urgent and dangerous, and the stakes for Ukraine and for every UN member state could not be higher. Russia's actions strike at the very heart of the UN Charter. This is as clear and consequential a threat to peace and security as anyone can imagine. In the wake of World War II, the Council was formed to address precisely the kind of threat that Ukraine now faces. As Article 39 says, the Security Council shall determine the existence of any threat to the peace. Thus, our charge is not only to address conflicts after they occur, but also to prevent them from happening in the first place. This is why today's meeting is so crucial. Russia's aggression today not only threatens Ukraine, it also threatens Europe. It threatens the international order this body is charged with upholding. An order that, if it stands for anything, stands for the principle that one country cannot simply redraw another country's borders by force or make another country's people live under a government they did not choose. We continue to hope Russia chooses the path of diplomacy over the path of conflict in Ukraine. But we cannot just wait and see. It is crucial that this Council address the risk that their aggressive and destabilizing behavior poses across the globe. First, let's be clear about the facts. Russia has assembled a massive military force of more than 100,000 troops along Ukraine's border. These are combat forces and special forces prepared to conduct offensive actions into Ukraine. This is the largest hear me clearly, mobilization of troops in Europe in decades. And as we speak, Russia is sending even more forces and arms to join them. Russia has already used more than 2,000 rail cars to move troops and weaponry from across Russia to the Ukrainian border. Russia has also moved nearly 5,000 troops into Belarus with short-range ballistic missiles, special forces, and anti-aircraft batteries. We've seen evidence that Russia intends to expand that presence to more than 30,000 troops near the Belarus-Ukraine border, less than 2 hours north of Kyiv, by early February. In addition to military activity, we've also seen a dramatic spike in cyber attacks on Ukraine in recent weeks. Russian military and intelligence services are spreading disinformation through state-owned media and proxy sites, and they are attempting without any factual basis to paint Ukraine and Western countries as the aggressors to fabricate a pretext for attack. Russia's military buildup on the border has been paired with extensive new demands and aggressive rhetoric. This is an escalation and a pattern of aggression that we've seen from Russia again and again. In 2014, Russia illegally invaded and seized Crimea. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia. Russian troops are currently refusing to depart Moldova despite the wishes of the Moldovan people and their democratically elected government. And in the Donbas region of Ukraine, Russian-backed separatists continue to foment and ignore violence toward the Ukrainian people. Recently, Russia has threatened to take military action should its demands not be met. If Russia further invades Ukraine, none of us will be able to say we didn't see it coming, and the consequences will be horrific, which is why this meeting is so important today. Already Russia's war in eastern Ukraine has killed more than 14,000 Ukrainians, nearly 3 million Ukrainians, half of whom are elderly people and children, need food, shelter, and life-saving assistance. Devastating as this situation is, it would pale in comparison to the humanitarian impact of the full-scale land invasion Russia is currently planning in Ukraine. Over the years, Russian leaders have claimed that Ukraine is not a real country and questioned its right to self-determination. So let's be clear. Ukraine is a UN member state that recently celebrated 3 decades of independence. It has a proud people and a rich culture. Ukraine is a sovereign country and a sovereign people entitled to determine their own future without the threat of force. This is not just the conviction that Ukrainians hold. It is a right enshrined by the UN Charter, a right that Russia and every other member of this institution has freely committed to upholding. Our international order is not perfect, but it is grounded in respect for people and countries to govern themselves, to defend themselves, and to associate with whom they choose. All countries have a stake in defending and preserving these principles, and nothing could be more fundamental. What would it mean for the world if former empires had license to start reclaiming territory by force? This would set us down a dangerous path. Russia could, of course, choose a different path, the path of diplomacy. In recent weeks, the United States, along with our European allies and partners and other nations around the globe, concerned by Russia's threat to Ukraine, have continued to do everything we can to resolve this crisis peacefully. In all of these talks, our messages have been clear and consistent. We seek the path of peace. We seek the path of dialogue. We do not want confrontation, but we will be decisive, swift, and united should Russia further invade Ukraine. We continue to believe there is a diplomatic path out of the crisis caused by Russia's unprovoked military buildup. We're working to pursue diplomacy in every possible venue. But we also know that diplomacy will not succeed in an atmosphere of threat and military escalation. That is why we have brought this situation before the Security Council today. The United States has been clear. If this is truly about Russia's security concerns in Europe, we're offering them an opportunity to address these concerns at the negotiating table. The test of Russia's good faith in the coming days and weeks is whether they will come to that table and stay at that table until we reach an understanding. If they refuse to do so, the world will know why and who is responsible. Fellow members of the Council and other UN member states, we urge you to assess not only Russia's statements, but their actions with clear eyes, to evaluate the risk this presents not just to Ukraine's border and its people, but to all of us, and to speak clearly and forcefully in favor of the path of diplomacy rather than the path of conflict. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States, and I give the floor to the representative of Albania.
Thank you, Madam President, for convening this open meeting, and thank you, Under Secretary General Di Carlo, for your briefing. Madam President, the primary responsibility of the Security Council is to maintain peace and security with a view to preventing conflicts in the world. We have argued here several times that in terms of prevention, the Council has still a long way to go. The Council has been seized many times to discuss the situation in Ukraine since the beginning of the aggression in 2014, and here we are again today. We express our deep concerns on the military buildup of Russia near Ukraine in recent months. Dozens of battalions have been already dislocated to the Ukrainian border. Military troops are being dispatched from eastern to western part of Russia. This includes heavy combat forces, tanks, artillery, air defense systems, and ballistic missiles. Several thousands of Russian troops have also been sent to Belarus. This movement of troops and weaponry is very worrying, has caused anxiety and fear among people in Ukraine, and justifiably serious international concerns, particularly for us in Europe. Madam President, let me reconfirm our unwavering support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Dear colleagues, in 1994, 27 years ago, Ukraine received security assurances through the Budapest Memorandum, where Russia, together with the US and UK, pledged, and I quote, to respect the independence and sovereignty and the existing borders of Ukraine, in exchange for giving up its nuclear arsenal. The signatories also reaffirmed their commitment to seek UN Security Council action to provide assistance to Ukraine should it become a victim of an act of aggression. We call on Russia and the Security Council to expressly confirm the respect of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Madam President, it would be wrong to consider the threat of a military attack by Russia against Ukraine as another crisis between Russia and the West. This is a challenge to the European security order and to the whole international security architecture, which is based on the UN Charter. It is an affront to the 1975 Helsinki Final Act and its decalogue, upon which OSCE is founded and where Russia is a part. These lost developments on the Russian-Ukrainian border are a well-known playbook. We have seen them in Georgia in 2008 and in Ukraine repeatedly since 2014, unfortunately at the cost of thousands of lives, civilian and military. Russia has used military violence as a means of achieving its political and geopolitical goals. Madam President, Russia is a big country and has a role to play in European and world geopolitics. It can play an important part in making the world a better and a safer place. Unfortunately, it is doing the contrary. The narratives of spheres of influence in Europe or dictating by threats the geostrategic orientation of other countries are tools of another century, of another time, reminiscences of the Cold War. Countries are and should be free to join whichever organization they want, be it NATO, the European Union, CSTO, or CIS. Sovereign countries take decisions by their free will, not under the threat of a gun. Madam President, what is to gain in a potential conflict to which everyone anticipates the disastrous consequences? What can justify the loss of thousands of lives, widespread destruction, severance of relations, continued tensions, including, as it has been made repeatedly clear, severe consequences for Russia itself? No other place knows more about war and its disastrous consequences than this room. Therefore, we must be able to see beyond and seek other means to address issues, however complex they are or seem to be. Albania believes that this crisis should be solved through talks and discussion. Finding solutions through negotiations was our primary focus during the OSCE chairmanship in office in 2020. It remains the same now in the Council. There are several mechanisms to be used through diplomatic efforts. Concrete steps towards de-escalation are needed, paving the ground towards talks in efforts to seek solutions. Such efforts should be made in good faith and not be conducted in a climate of escalation rhetoric. The resumption of the Normandy format meetings last week in Paris was the right step, and we hope that this process will continue. Madam President, we all should bear in mind that the crisis in and around Ukraine has a direct impact on the whole Europe. The instrumentalization of ethnic minorities, targeted cyber attacks, political interference here and there for political gains, and a growing tendency of genocide denial and glorification on war crimes and war criminals, all these are acts that seek destabilization, create tension, and should be treated as a threat to peace and security because they are. This is why we deem of paramount importance to invest in prevention, and I hope this meeting will be part of such genuine efforts, and I thank you.
I thank the representative of Albania, and I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Madam President, and I'm grateful to Under-Secretary General Di Carlo for her briefing. Madam President, the first article of the UN Charter defines our purpose here: to take collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to the peace. Today, over 100,000 Russian troops are massed on Ukraine's borders. They are equipped with tanks, armoured vehicles, rocket artillery, and short-range ballistic missiles. They are supported by Russian air and maritime long-range strike capabilities. This is not a routine deployment. This is the largest military build-up in Europe in decades. In the best-case scenario, the scale of the Russian forces assembled on three sides of Ukraine is deeply destabilizing. In the worst case, it is preparation for a military invasion of a sovereign country. Madam President, in 2008, Russia told this Council that it was sending peacekeepers into Georgia. In reality, it was invading an independent, democratic country. In 2014, Russia denied to this Council the presence of its forces in Crimea. In reality, its soldiers were annexing part of an independent, democratic Ukraine. Today, Russia denies that its forces are posing a threat to Ukraine. But yet again, we see disinformation, cyber attacks, and destabilizing plots directed against an independent, democratic country. Madam President, the United Kingdom welcomes our discussion today as part of the intense diplomatic effort to ensure Russia de-escalates the situation and avoids conflict. We are unwavering in our support for Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. At the same time, we have sought dialogue with Russia through the OSCE, the NATO-Russia Council, and bilateral discussions with all levels of the Russian government. We are ready to address mutual security concerns based on existing European security structures and international commitments. This includes our expectation that Russia should address our concerns. We are committed to a constructive dialogue if Russia is genuine about finding a diplomatic solution. This Council has a vital interest in this diplomatic effort. Because let's be clear, this is not a regional issue. Any Russian invasion or act of aggression against Ukraine would be a gross breach of international law and Russia's commitments under the Charter. Conflict would result in terrible bloodshed and destabilize the entire international community. There should be no doubt about how costly such a miscalculation would be for Russia, or how devastating it would be for the people of Ukraine, whose only provocation is to want a democratic future for their country. There would be no winners, only victims. Civilians caught in the crossfire or forced to flee. Families grieving the loss of fallen soldiers on both sides. So, Madam President, we urge Russia to make clear in this Council that it will abide by its obligations under the Charter, that it has no plans to invade Ukraine, that it will refrain from the threat or use of force against its neighbour, that it will not further undermine Ukraine's sovereignty or territorial integrity by military or any other means, and that it will stand down its troops. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam President,
la situation
the
aux
situation
frontières de
at
l'Ukraine
Ukraine's borders
est un motif de vive
is a
préoccupation
source of
pour la
deep
France.
concern for France.
L'accumulation de
The
capacités
build-up
militaires
of
importantes à la
considerable
frontière
military
d'un État
capacities along the
souverain
border
voisin
of a neighbouring
constitue
sovereign
un
state
comportement
represents
menaçant.
threatening
Elle
conduct.
soulève des
It
interrogations
raises
légitimes
legitimate
sur les
questions
intentions de la Russie,
on Russia's
d'autant
intentions,
plus que ce pays a déjà
particularly
porté atteinte
since
à
this
l'intégrité
country has
territoriale de
already
l'Ukraine dans le passé.
infringed the territorial integrity of Ukraine in the past.
La France réaffirme son
France
soutien plein
reaffirms
et entier
its
à
full
l'indépendance,
support
à la
for
souveraineté
the independence,
et à l'intégrité
sovereignty,
territoriale
and
de
territorial integrity
l'Ukraine dans
of
ses
Ukraine
frontières internationalement
within its
reconnues.
internationally recognized
Elle appelle
borders.
la Russie à s'engager dans
France
une
calls on
désescalade
Russia
de
to
la
engage
situation,
in
à
de-escalating the
respecter le droit
situation, to
international
abide by
et à
international
participer
law,
de manière
and to
constructive au
participate
dialogue dans le cadre
constructively
des
in dialogue
mécanismes
within the
internationaux
framework
établis.
of established
La
international
priorité
mechanisms.
est d'œuvrer collectivement
The priority
à une
is to work
désescalade
together
rapide.
towards a swift
Le président
de-escalation.
Macron s'y est employé
President Macron
au cours des derniers
has made
jours,
efforts in that
lors de
regard
son
over the last
déplacement à
few
Berlin,
days, during his
puis
trip to
de son
Berlin,
entretien
and
téléphonique
then
avec
during
le
his
président
telephone
Poutine.
call with President
Cette
Putin.
réunion du Conseil de sécurité
This
doit également
Security Council
s'inscrire dans cet
meeting should
objectif.
also be in line with
La
this
France
objective.
soutient tous les efforts de dialogue
France supports
dans les
all
différents
efforts
cadres
at
existants
dialogue within
et souhaite
the
que
different
les Européens
existing
y prennent toute
frameworks,
leur
and we
part.
hope that Europeans
Dans
will
le
be fully
cadre du format
involved.
Normandie,
In the
qui
context
rassemble
of
l'Allemagne, la
the
France,
Normandy
la
format that
Russie et
brings
l'Ukraine,
together Germany,
ces
France,
efforts ont
Russia and
permis,
Ukraine,
lors de la
these
réunion du
efforts
26 janvier à
enabled at
Paris,
the 26th of
de
January meeting
s'accorder
in Paris
sur une
an
déclaration de
agreement
soutien
on
au
a
respect
statement of
inconditionnel du
support
cessez-le-feu
for the
et de la mise
unconditional
en œuvre
compliance with
des
the
accords de
ceasefire and the
Minsk.
implementation of the Minsk
Nous
agreements.
poursuivrons les efforts en
We
ce
will
sens
pursue
lors de la
efforts in this
prochaine réunion
direction at
prévue
the
à
next
brève
meeting
échéance à
planned to be
Berlin.
held in short order in Berlin.
Le dialogue, quelles que soient les
Dialogue,
enceintes où il est
regardless
conduit,
of the venue
doit
in which it takes
respecter les
place,
principes
must
fondamentaux
observe the
sur lesquels
fundamental
repose la
principles
sécurité
underpinning
européenne,
European
telle
security
qu'établie dans
as
la Charte des
established
Nations
in
Unies,
the Charter of the United
dans les
Nations,
documents fondateurs
in
de
the founding
l'OSCE,
documents
y
of
compris
the
l'acte final
OSCE,
d'Helsinki
including
et
the
la Charte de
Helsinki
Paris.
Final Act and the
Ces
Charter of
principes
Paris.
comprennent notamment
These principles
l'égalité souveraine
comprise,
et
in particular,
l'intégrité territoriale
sovereign
des États,
equality and the territorial integrity of
l'inviolabilité des
states,
frontières,
the inviolability of borders,
le non-recours à la menace
the
ou à l'emploi de la force,
non-recourse to
et la
the
liberté
threat
des
or the
États
use
de
of
choisir
force, and the
ou de
freedom of
modifier
states
leurs
to either
propres
choose
dispositifs
or
de
change
sécurité.
their own security
Ils ne
measures.
sont ni négociables,
They are
ni
neither
sujets à
negotiable
révision
nor subject
ou à
to any
réinterprétation.
revision nor
La
reinterpretation.
notion de sphère
Notions
d'influence
of
n'a
spheres of
pas sa
influence
place au
have
XXIe
no
siècle.
place in the 21st century.
Si la Russie ne choisit pas la voie
If
du
Russia does
dialogue
not choose the
et du
path of
respect du droit
dialogue and
international, la
respect
réponse
for
sera
international
forte et
law,
unie.
the response
Toute
will
nouvelle
be
atteinte à
robust
la
and
souveraineté
united.
et à
Any fresh
l'intégrité
infringement
territoriale de
of
l'Ukraine
the sovereignty and
aura
territorial
des
integrity of
conséquences
Ukraine
massives et un coût
by Russia
sévère.
will have
Les
massive
Européens
consequences and a
travaillent à des
severe
mesures
cost.
restrictives
Europeans
coordonnées
are
et se
working on
tiennent prêts,
coordinated restrictive
conjointement
measures
avec leurs
and stand
partenaires, à
ready together
réagir.
with their partners to react.
Si la voie du dialogue
If
et de la
the path of
coopération est
dialogue
choisie,
and cooperation
l'Union
is
européenne
chosen,
est
the
prête
European
à
Union
s'engager
stands ready to
pour
engage
développer
to
ses
develop
relations avec
its
la Russie
relations with
sur la
Russia
base
on
d'une
the
approche
basis
unie,
of a
à long
united,
terme et
long-term
stratégique,
and strategic
selon les
approach
5 principes
in accordance
directeurs de
with
2016.
the 5 guiding
Dans le
principles from
contexte de
2016.
menaces et de tensions
In
actuelles,
the
la
context
France
of current
réaffirme
threats and
sa
tensions, France
solidarité avec le
reaffirms its
peuple et le
solidarity with
gouvernement
the Ukrainian
ukrainien.
people and government.
Avec nos partenaires
With our
européens, nous
European partners, we
continuerons à
will
nous mobiliser
continue to
en soutien à
mobilize in
l'Ukraine,
support of
notamment par la
Ukraine,
voie du
particularly
soutien
through
aux réformes.
support
Je vous
for
remercie.
reforms. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France and I give the floor to the representative of India.
Thank you, Madam President. We have been closely following the evolving developments relating to Ukraine, including through ongoing high-level security talks between the Russian Federation and the United States, as well as under the Normandy format in Paris. India's interest is in finding a solution that can provide for immediate de-escalation of tensions, taking into account the legitimate security interests of all countries and aimed towards securing long-term peace and stability in the region and beyond. We have also been in touch with all concerned parties. It is our considered view that the issues can only be resolved through diplomatic dialogue. In this context, we welcome the efforts underway, including under the Minsk Agreement and the Normandy format. Flowing from the recently concluded meeting in Paris under the Normandy format, we also welcome the unconditional observance of the July 2020 ceasefire and reaffirmation of Minsk agreements as the basis of work under the ongoing Normandy format, in particular, commitment of all sides to reduce disagreements on the way forward. We also welcome their agreement to meet in Berlin in 2 weeks. We urge all parties to continue to engage through all diplomatic channels and to keep working towards the full implementation of the Minsk package. Quiet and constructive diplomacy is the need of the hour. Any steps that increase tension may best be avoided by all sides in the larger interest of securing international peace and security. More than 20,000 Indian students and nationals live and study in different parts of Ukraine, including in its border areas. The well-being of Indian nationals is a priority to us. Madam President, I reiterate our call for the peaceful resolution of the situation by sincere and sustained diplomatic efforts to ensure that concerns of all sides are resolved through constructive dialogue. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank the representative of India, and I give the floor to the representative of Ghana.
Thank you very much, Madam President. A few moments ago, this Council voted to adopt the agenda for this meeting to consider the situation in Ukraine. Our responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security makes it imperative to encourage the path of dialogue and preventive diplomacy. That is the only way to end the tensions, bridge the differences between the parties, and forge a unified and pacific position on the situation in Ukraine. Let me begin by thanking Rosemary DiCarlo, USG for Political Affairs and Peace Building, for the briefing. I also welcome the participation of the representatives of Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, and Lithuania in this meeting.
Ghana has been following closely the situation in Ukraine. I've also listened carefully to the briefing we just received from the Secretariat, as well as the statement of delegations that have spoken before me. We have paid careful attention to the perspectives of the key parties to the situation and hope that at the end of this meeting, the views of members of this Council will be closer to each other than when we first began. We note from the situation in Ukraine that while there has been a build-up of Russian troops at the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine, those troops are presently within the national territory of the Russian Federation. We also have taken note that while the military build-up of the troops of the Russian Federation are within its borders, this has caused for Ukraine and other parties a concern over the intentions of the build-up and its prospective implications on international peace and security. We therefore welcome the ongoing dialogue between the Russian Federation and the United States to address primary and secondary security concerns that have implications on the situation in Ukraine, as well as the recent face-to-face dialogue between the representatives of the Russian Federation and Ukraine under the Normandy format in Paris, after several months of no contact, to enhance trust and remove possibilities of an accidental incident. We note with concern the implications the situation has had on the economy of Ukraine and neighboring markets, and welcome in this regard the call by the President of Ukraine for an easing of the strong narratives on the situation. This must be a time for confidence building to facilitate a restoration of normalcy for the people of Ukraine. In concluding, Madam President, Ghana believes that in conformity with the provisions of the Charter of this organization, differences between member states should only be resolved through peaceful means. We remain encouraged by the ongoing diplomatic engagement between the parties and reiterate our support for those efforts, which should also take into account the delicate nature of the situation. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
I thank the representative of Ghana. I give the floor to the representative of Ireland.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thanks also to Under-Secretary General De Carlo for your briefing. Madam President, today's discussion is an important opportunity for the Council to address the developing situation at Ukraine's borders, which has become a matter of profound international concern. Let me underline at the outset that Ireland, along with our EU partners, is a strong and unwavering supporter of Ukraine's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognised borders. At this moment of rising tension on Ukraine's frontiers, arising from Russia's military build-up, Ireland calls for calm, de-escalation and the pursuit of diplomacy. We call also for constructive and determined engagement on all dialogue tracks, including the Normandy format and the OSCE. Ireland is fully committed to the core principles enshrined in the UN Charter. These include the sovereign, equality and territorial integrity of states. We recall today that these principles were agreed collectively and freely by all members of the United Nations. Moreover, European security is built on a series of essential commitments and obligations. It is the fundamental right of a sovereign and independent state to chart its own path in the world, to choose its own foreign policy, and to make arrangements for the security and defence of its territory. The Helsinki Final Act, one of the foundational documents of the OSCE, confirms the obligation of states, and I quote, to respect each other's sovereign equality and the right of every state to juridical equality, to territorial integrity, and to freedom and political independence, end of quote. Subsequent agreements, including the Charter of Paris and the Charter of European Security, agreed in Istanbul in 1999, reaffirm the core principles and underpinning collective European security. Madam President, earlier this month, Ireland marked 100 years of a hard-won independence. Just as we would not accept another state determining our foreign and security policy, Ukraine similarly has the sovereign right to choose its own policies. In this Council, we are too often faced with the terrible humanitarian consequences of violent conflict, usually where diplomacy and dialogue have failed. Force is never the answer. It is not the answer now. What is needed now, above all, is a negotiated diplomatic solution that reinforces our collective security in Europe. We have the institutions and the mechanisms within which to pursue this solution. Let us use them. Absent that, it will be innocent civilians who once again pay the awful price of conflict. Madam President, that is not a prospect any of us wish to contemplate. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ireland, and I give the floor to the representative of China.
谢谢主席女士。
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President,
中方反对
China
安理会
opposes
根据
the
美国的
Security
要求
Council's
举行这
holding
次
of
公开
this
会。
open meeting as requested by the
美
United
国常
States.
驻联合国代
The
表在
permanent
1月27日
representative of the
致信
U.S. to
安
the
理会
UN
主
in her
席
letter to the President of the
称
Council dated
美
January
方要求安理
27th
会举行公
claimed
开
that the
会的理
reason
由
why
是
the U.S. is asking
俄
the
罗
Council
斯
to hold this
在乌
open
克兰
meeting
边界的
was that
兵力部署
Russia's
对
deployment
国
of
际
troops
和
along
平
the
与安
Ukrainian
全
border
构成威
posed a
胁。
threat to international peace and
中方
security.
不能认
China
同这样的看
cannot
法。
align itself with this point of
近期
view.
围绕乌克兰问
Recently,
题确
there
实
have
出
indeed
现一
been
些
some
紧张
tensions
局势，
over the issue of
我
Ukraine,
们正在
and we
关注
are
引
paying
起紧张局
attention
势
to
的
what
原
exactly
因。
are causing the tensions.
以美国为首的一些国
Some
家
countries
声称
led
最
by the
近在乌
United
克
States
兰会
have
发生
claimed
战争，
that there will soon be a war in
但俄
Ukraine.
罗斯已经一再的
Russia
声明，
has repeatedly
俄方没
stated
有
that
发
it
起
has
军
no
事行动的
plans
计
to
划。
launch any military action.
乌克兰方面
And
也明确
Ukraine
表
has
示，
made it
他们
clear
不需
that
要
it
战
does
争。
not need a war.
在此情况下，
Under such
有关国家
circumstances,
坚称可能
what is
发
the
生战
basis
争，
for the countries concerned
依据
to
何在？
insist that there may be a war?
我们注意到，
We
美国、
note
乌克兰
that the
和
United
有关
States,
欧洲国家以
Ukraine,
及北
and the
约
relevant European countries,
正在
as well
同
as
俄罗斯
NATO,
进行不
are
同形
having
式的外
varying
交接
forms
触
of。diplomatic contacts with Russia.
相关各方之
The
间
parties
应
concerned
该坚
should
持通过
persist
对话
in
谈判
seeking to resolve their
寻求
differences
解决分
through
歧。
dialogues and negotiations.
当前急需的
What we
是
urgently
静
need
悄悄
now
外
is
交，
quiet
而不
diplomacy,
是
but
麦克
not
风外交。
microphone diplomacy.
很多安理
This
会
is
成员
the
都持
viewpoint
这一看法，
held by many members of
并
the
为此
Council who have
做
also
出了
made
不懈努力。
unrelenting efforts
遗憾
towards
的是
this end.
美方没有
Regrettably,
接受
the U.S.
这样的
did not
建
accept
设性建议。
such a constructive proposal.
在对话談判正在進
At a
行，
time when dialogues and
同時還
negotiations
有
are
待取得積極
underway
進展的情況
and
下，
concrete
安理
progress
會
is
舉
yet to be
行
made,
公開會，
the holding of
顯
such an
然
open
不利於
meeting by the
為對
Council is
話談
clearly
判
not
營造有利
conducive
氣
to
氛，
creating a favorable
也
environment for
不利
dialogues and
於推動
negotiations,
化解
nor is it
緊
conducive
張
to
局勢。
diffusing the tension.
中方再次呼籲
China once
有關
again
各方保
calls
持
on
冷
all
靜，
parties concerned to
不
remain
做任何
calm, not to do
刺激局勢
anything
緊
to
張、
aggravate
渲染
tension
炒作
or
危
hype
機
up
的
the
事
crisis,
情，並在
but
充分考慮彼此合理安全關切和相互
properly
尊重的
resolve
基礎
their
上，
differences through
通過平
consultations
等
on
協
an
商
equal footing on
妥
the
善
basis
解
of
決分歧。
fully taking into account each other's legitimate security concerns and
主
on
席
the
女士
basis of mutual respect.
中方在乌克兰问題上的
Madam
立場
President,
是一貫的，
China's position on
解決烏克蘭問
Ukraine
題
is consistent.
還是要
To
回
solve
到
this issue, we
落
still
實
need
新
to
明斯克
return
協
to
議
the
這一
origin
原
of
點上。
implementing the new Minsk
新
agreement.
明斯克協議
This
得到
agreement,
安理會
endorsed by
第
the Security Council
2202
in
號
its
決
Resolution
議的合可，
2202, is a
是各方公認的有約束力的基礎性政治
foundational
文件，
political document
理
recognized
應
by
得
all
到
parties
切實執行。
and should really be
中方
effectively
支持所
implemented.
有符合這一協
China
議方向
supports all
和精
efforts
神
in
的
line
努
with
力，
this direction and
希
spirit
望
of this
有
agreement
關各
and
方
hopes
展
that all
現執
parties
行
concerned
新明
will
斯克協
show
議
their
的
positive
積極
willingness
意願，
to implement this
協
new
商解
Minsk
決協議執
agreement,
行過程
resolve
中
their
出現的
differences
分歧，
arising from the
推動
implementation of the
將新
agreement
明斯
through
克協議
consultation and
落到
promote
實處。
the actual implementation of this new Minsk
北約擴
agreement.
員是處理
The
當前緊
expansion of
張局
NATO
勢
is
難
a
以 以绕开的问题。
difficult to circumvent in
北
handling
约
the current tension.
为冷战
NATO
时期的
is
产
the
物，
product of the Cold
北约
War,
扩员
and
是
NATO
集团政
expansion
治的集中体
epitomizes
现。
group politics.
我们认
We
为，
believe
一国安全
the
不能以
security
损
of
害
one
他
country
国安全
cannot
为
be
代价，
achieved at the expense of the
地区
security
安
of other
全
countries.
更不能以
Still
强
less
化
can regional
甚至扩
security
张
be
军事集
guaranteed
团
by
为保障。
intensifying or even expanding
在21
military
世纪
groups.
的今天，
Today in the
各
21st
方应当
century, all
摒弃
parties
冷
should
战思维，
completely abandon the
通过
Cold War
谈判
mentality
形成
and
均
come up
衡、
with a balanced,
有效、
effective,
可
and
持续的
sustainable
欧洲
European
安
security
全机制。
mechanism through negotiations.
俄罗斯的
And
合理关
Russia's
切
legitimate
应
security
当
concerns
得到
should
重
be
视
heeded
和解决。
and addressed.
谢谢你，李欣女士。
Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of China, and I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank
you, Madam President. We would like to thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing.
Я прежде всего хочу поблагодарить те страны, которые несли в себе возможность
and deemed it
проголосовать
possible
против или
to
воздержаться
vote
против
against
предложения
or abstain against the
Соединенных Штатов
proposal of the
обсуждать
US
сегодняшнюю
to
тему.
discuss this topic today.
У кого-то может сложиться впечатление,
One might have the
как будто бы
impression
Россия
that Russia
опасается
is
обсуждать
scared of
ситуацию
discussing the
на Украине.
situation regarding
И
Ukraine
поэтому затеяла
and
процедурное
therefore
голосование.
put forward this procedural vote.
Россия вовсе не отказывается
Is
обсуждать
not
ситуацию на Украине.
refusing to discuss the situation
Но нам
in
совершенно
Ukraine,
непонятно,
but we
что мы
just don't
сегодня здесь
understand
обсуждаем.
what we are discussing here today
И зачем вообще мы
and
здесь находимся.
why we are indeed here today.
Как я уже говорил,
As I already
на
said,
17
On
февраля
the 17th of February,
мы запланировали
we are
заседание в
planning
ходе
to
нашего
hold a meeting
председательства о 7-й
during
годовщине
our presidency
реализации
of the 7th
Минских соглашений,
anniversary of the implementation of the Minsk
где мы как раз
agreements,
можем поговорить о
where we
ситуации
are able to talk
с
about the
украинским
situation
урегулированием.
regarding Ukrainian
Но
settlement.
сегодняшнее заседание
But
вовсе не
today's
об этом.
meeting is not about that.
В последнее время мы сталкиваемся с
Recently, we've
весьма
been
необычной
encountering a
даже
very
по меркам
unusual,
нашего
even
неспокойного времени
given
ситуации.
today's difficult time situation, a very unusual situation.
Перемещение
The
российских
deployment of
войск в
Russian
пределах
troops
нашей собственной
within our own
территории,
territory
неоднократно
has
происходившее и ранее в
frequently
тех или
occurred
иных масштабах,
on varying scales before
и не вызывавшее
and
никакой
has not
истерики.
caused any hysterics whatsoever.
Военнослужащих войск, которые находятся в местах своей дислокации,
who
где они
are
были
in their
и
own
раньше,
areas of deployment and barracks where they were before.
а вовсе не на российско-украинской
And
границе.
they are, where they were before, not actually on the border.
Так вот,
So
это перемещение российских
this
войск на нашей
deployment of
территории
Russian
выдается нашими
troops
американскими и
in
западными
our own
коллегами
territory is getting our
за
Western
подтверждение
and
якобы
US
планируемой военной
colleagues
акции
to say that there's going to be a planned military
и
action
даже агрессии.
and even an act of aggression.
Причем американский поспред
But
сказал это
the
так, как будто эта
USPR
агрессия
said
уже
as if
состоялась.
that
Я
act of
внимательно
aggression has
слушал его
already
выступление.
taken place. I very carefully listened to her statement.
Военные акции России против Украины, до которой,
Military action of Russia
как они
against
всех
Ukraine
убеждают,
that they're all assuring us is
остались
going to
считанные
take
недели,
place in just a
если
few
не дни.
weeks' time, if not a few days' time.
При этом никаких
There, however,
доказательств,
is no
подтверждающих столь
proof
серьезное
confirming
обвинение,
such
не
a
приводится.
serious accusation whatsoever being put
Однако это не
forward.
мешает
However, it
раздуть
is not
истерию до
preventing
такой
people
степени,
from
что
whipping up hysteria
конкретные
to such an
экономические
extent
последствия
that an
уже
actual
начали
economic
ощущать на
impact
себе
is
наши
already being felt
украинские соседи.
by our Ukrainian neighbors.
Наши западные коллеги говорят о необходимости
Western
деэскалации.
colleagues are talking about the need for
Но
de-escalation.
прежде всего
However,
сами
first and
нагнетают
foremost, they
напряженность,
themselves are whipping up
риторику
tensions
и
and
провоцируют
rhetoric and
эскалацию.
are provoking escalation.
Разговоры о
The
грядущей войне
discussions
сами по себе
about a
провокационны.
threat of war is provocative in and of itself.
Вы как будто
You
призываете к
are
этому, хотите и
almost calling
ждете,
for this.
когда это
You want
произойдет.
it to happen. You're waiting for
Как
it
будто
to
вы хотите
happen,
сделать
as if
реальностью
you
ваши
want
домыслы.
to make your words become a reality.
Это несмотря на то,
This is
что мы
despite the
постоянно
fact that
опровергаем
we
эти
are
обвинения.
constantly rejecting these allegations.
И это при том, что ни
And
одной
this
угрозы
is
о
despite the
планированном
fact that
вторжении на
no threat of a
Украину,
planned
на
invasion
Украину
into
из
Ukraine
уст кого-либо
from
из
the
российских
lips of
политиков
any
или
Russian
общественных
politician
деятелей
or
за все
public
это
figure
время не
over all
прозвучало.
of this period has been made. No
Наоборот,
such
мы на
threat has
всех
been made.
уровнях
Rather, at
категорически
all levels,
опровергали
we've been categorically
подобные обвинения.
rejecting such plans.
Делаем это и
And
сейчас.
we're going to do this right now.
Все, кто утверждает обратное,
Everybody
вводят вас в
who claims
заблуждение.
the opposite is misleading you.
Вообще, если бы не наши западные
If our
коллеги,
Western colleagues
которые спровоцировали и
who
поддержали в
provoked and
2014 году
supported the
кровавый
2014
конституционный переворот,
bloody anti-constitutional
приведший к власти в Киеве
coup, bringing
националистов,
to power in
радикалов,
Kiev nationalists,
русофобов
radicals,
и просто
Russophobes,
нацистов.
and pure fascists.
Nazis rather. If they'd not done this, then we to date would be living in a spirit of good neighborly relations and mutual cooperation. However, some in the West just don't clearly like this positive scenario. What's happening today is yet another attempt to drive a wedge between Russia and Ukraine. Thanks to their geopolitical games, our colleagues have been suffering for some 7 years now. The Ukrainians are actively being brainwashed. They're cultivated Russophobia and radical thinking, leading to the belief that for Ukraine to have a bright future, it mustn't establish relations with its neighbors, but rather at any cost strive to join the EU and NATO. They are banning Russian, which is a native language for a significant, if not the majority of people in Ukraine. They are causing an Orthodox split, church split, divide. They are making heroes out of those people who fought on the side of Hitler, who destroyed Jews, Poles, Ukrainians, and Russians. The interest of the Ukrainian people in this destructive game is something that our Western colleagues are not taking into consideration. Their aim is to prevent the natural, brotherly coexistence of our two people, brotherly peoples. Peoples and countries, rather, which would destroy their plans to weaken Russia and would create an arc of instability around it. There's nothing that we're seeing that's new here, in the same spirit of divide and conquer. The divide and rule. This same spirit was characteristic for Western powers, or Western states rather, earlier. It's also noteworthy that our American colleagues artificially are getting involved in the sham tension that they themselves created on the Russian-Ukrainian border. There was the negotiation process pushed forward by ourselves to ensure for Russia legally binding security guarantees. They deliberately are creating the impression that Moscow apparently is specifically or on purpose stirring up tension that means that it can be more accessible for the US and NATO. If you look at the timetable for the negotiation process, you'll see that such considerations are fundamentally untrue. The situation, in fact, is completely the opposite. Our Western colleagues are trying on the top of this wave of hysteria to boil our dialogue solely down to so-called settlement of the situation on the border with Ukraine. Our security demands are much broader. The non-accession of Ukraine to NATO, the non-deployment in its territory of foreign troops. All of this is just one part of the agreement that could fundamentally improve the military-political situation in Europe and for the world as a whole. And this type of agreement is something that we talked about in the Astana, Istanbul, and OSCE summits, where apart from the freedom to choose one's allies or alliances was also the stipulation
о том, что безопасность одних государств не может обеспечиваться за счет безопасности
some states should not be carried out to the detriment of the security of other states.
Раз уж наши американские коллеги собрали нас сегодня, то пусть они предъявят хоть какие-то доказательства, кроме измышлений, о том, что Россия собирается напасть на Украину. В выступлении моей американской коллеги было достаточно обвинений в агрессивных действиях России, но ни одного конкретного факта. Кстати, я хочу задать вопрос не только нашим коллегам из США, но и тем, кто упоминал это. Откуда взялась цифра в 100 тысяч военнослужащих, которые расположены, как вы утверждаете, на российско-украинской границе? Мы нигде эту цифру не называли и не подтверждали.
Мы помним эти приемы еще с тех пор, как покойный госсекретарь США Колин Пауэлл размахивал в этом зале пробиркой с неизвестным веществом в качестве доказательства наличия амуров. Оружие так и не нашли, но что стало со страной, всем хорошо известно. Похоже, что и Украину наши американские коллеги готовы принести в жертву своим геополитическим интересам. Иначе сложно объяснить, почему, собирая нас сегодня, инициаторы встречи не прислушались даже к мнению президента Украины, просившего Запад не нагнетать панику. Уже губительно сказывается на экономической ситуации. Иначе также сложно объяснить, зачем наши коллеги из США и ряда других стран активно накачивают Украину оружием и боеприпасами. И при этом говорят об этом с гордостью. Оружием, которое та с готовностью применяет против мирного населения на востоке собственной страны. И все это делается в нарушении Минских договоренностей, утвержденных Советом Безопасности ООН, в качестве единственной основы для мирного урегулирования внутриукраинского конфликта. Кстати, моя американская коллега упоминала, что в ходе конфликта погибло 14 тысяч человек. Я бы хотел порекомендовать ей почитать доклады специальной мониторинговой миссии ОБСЕ и посмотреть, на какой стороне сколько погибло людей.
How many people died on each side out of these 14,000? Most of these people are civilians in Donbass who died from shelling from the Ukrainian armed forces.
Госпожа председатель, маневры США вокруг СОЗа нашей сегодняшней встречи особенно неадекватны и лицемерны на фоне того, что именно американцы имеют рекордные показатели присутствия войск за пределами своей территории. Американские военные, советники, вооружения, в том числе ядерные, зачастую расположены за тысячи километров от Вашингтона. Не говоря уже о том, что военные авантюры США унесли десятки и сотни тысяч жизней граждан стран, куда они несли мир и демократию. США неоднократно, в том числе последние годы, применяли силу в отношении других государств без санкций Совета Безопасности ООН. В их арсенале односторонние санкции и принудительные меры, угрозы, исполнять которые, как приговор некого Верховного суда, они пытаются заставить всех. Согласно данным американских экспертов, 84 из 193 стран-членов ООН в той или иной степени подвергались оккупации или агрессии США, а в 191 государстве в 20-21 веках так или иначе размещались американские войска. По общедоступным в интернете данным, США содержат около 750 военных баз в более чем 80 странах мира. Общее число размещенных за рубежом военнослужащих США за границей 175 тысяч. 175. 175,000. Из них более 60 тысяч в Европе. Объем военного бюджета США в 2020 году составил $778 миллиардов.
$700 million. 778.
Российского 61 миллиард, то есть меньше, чем в 12 раз. Вот это примеры совершенно очевидные и конкретные угрозы международному миру и безопасности. Что же касается призывов урегулировать кризис вокруг Украины, то мы двумя руками за. Но у этого кризиса есть только одно измерение – внутриукраинское. Исправить ситуацию можно исключительно через выполнение Киевом уже упомянутых мной Минских договоренностей, предусматривающих прежде всего прямой диалог с Донецком и Луганском. Другого пути нет. Если наши западные коллеги подталкивают Киев к саботажу Минских договоренностей, чем украинские власти охотно пользуются. чем украинские власти охотно пользуются,
that they're willingly doing,
то это может закончиться самым плачевным образом для Украины.
end in the absolute worst way for
И не потому, что
Ukraine,
кто-то
and
ее
not
разрушит,
because somebody has destroyed it,
а потому, что она разрушит себя сама.
it would have destroyed itself.
И Россия здесь абсолютно ни при
Russia
чем.
has
Не пытайтесь
absolutely nothing to do
перекладывать
with this.
вину с
Don't
больной
try
головы на
to
здоровую.
shift the blame on
Обо всем
somebody
об
else.
этом, однако, мы
And
подробно поговорим
we are going instead to
17
talk
февраля
about
в
all of
ходе
this in
давно
detail on the 17th
запланированного
of
нами
February
ежегодного
during
заседания
the
Совета
long-planned
Безопасности
annual
по
UN Security
выполнению
Council
резолюции
meeting on the
2202.
implementation of Resolution 2202. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation. I give the floor to the representative of Gabon.
Merci Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam
Je remercie
President.
Madame
I'd
la
like to
Secrétaire
thank
Générale Adjointe
the
Rosemary
Undersecretary
Di Carlo
General
pour
Rosemary
son
DiCarlo
exposé.
for her briefing.
Madame la Présidente, mon pays
Madam President,
suit avec beaucoup
my
d'attention
country
la
is
situation
following
qui prévaut
closely
aux
the
frontières de
prevailing
l'Ukraine et de la
situation
Russie
at the borders of
et a
Ukraine
pris
and
connaissance
Russia.
des informations
We have taken note
relatives
of the
à une
information
importante
on
mobilisation de
a
troupes russes
considerable
aux frontières de
mobilization
l'Ukraine,
of Russian troops
laissant
at Ukraine's
présager
borders
l'imminence d'une action
that
militaire.
portend imminent military
Ces informations
action.
alarmantes sont
This
accompagnées sur
alarming
le terrain
information
par
is
une
accompanied on the
véritable
ground
effervescence
by a
assortie du
true
déploiement
maelstrom of
de
activity
moyens
along with the
financiers
deployment
importants
of troops,
et
military
d'équipements militaires
hardware
de pays
and
amis
military
de
hardware
l'Ukraine.
from friendly countries of Ukraine.
L'escalade verbale et la vive tension
The
qui en découle
consequential
polarisent une
rhetorical
importante
escalation
activité
and
diplomatique
acute
qui se
tensions
traduit
are
par différentes
polarizing
initiatives,
important
dont le
diplomatic
format de Normandie,
activity conducted
dans le
through
cadre de la
various
mise en œuvre des
initiatives,
accords de
including
Minsk.
the Normat format,
Face à cette situation de
the
tension
Normandy
particulièrement
format
préoccupante,
in the framework
mon
of the
pays,
implementation of the Minsk agreement.
conscient des
In the face
enjeux
of
et du
this
potentiel des forces en
situation
présence,
of particularly worrisome
appelle
tensions, my
l'ensemble des
country,
parties
aware of the
prenantes
challenges
à la
and the
retenue
potential of
et
the
à
forces in
privilégier
place,
les voies du
calls
dialogue
on
et de la
all
négociation
stakeholders to
en vue
demonstrate
de
restraint
préserver
and to
la
favour the path
stabilité
of dialogue
et
and
la paix dans la
negotiation
région.
in order to preserve peace
C'est
and
le moment
stability in the
pour
region.
la communauté internationale
It is
et
time
ses
for the
membres
international community and its
d'activer
members
les
to
canaux de la
activate
diplomatie
the
préventive
channels of preventive
tels que
diplomacy,
prévus par le chapitre
such
6
as those
de la Charte des
provided
Nations
by
Unies consacrée
Chapter
au
6
règlement
of the
pacifique des
UN
différends.
Charter enshrined
Il
in
est évident
the peaceful
que
settlement of disputes.
l'efficacité de cette
It is
diplomatie
clear
préventive
that the
est
effectiveness
tributaire
of
non
this
seulement de la
preventive
bonne foi
diplomacy
des
depends
protagonistes,
not only
mais
on
surtout
the
du
good
tact,
faith of
de
the
la
protagonists,
sérénité
but
et du
also
cadre de sa mise en
on
œuvre.
the tactful and
La
calm
dualité de
conduct
rhétorique,
as well as the framework within which
celle
such
alarmante
diplomacy
concernant
occurs.
l'imminence d'une
We
action
see
militaire
a
en
two-sided
Ukraine, d'une
rhetoric.
part,
On the one hand, an
et
alarming
celle de
rhetoric
démenti,
on the
qui
imminence
est
of military
juxtaposée
action in
d'autre part,
Ukraine, and on the other, a
amplifie
denial
la
from the
fragmentation
other
de ce
side.
Conseil
These
au moment
intensify
où
the
les peuples du
fragmentation of
monde
this Council,
attendent de lui
just as the
un
people of the world
consensus
are
et
expecting
une
from
action
our
résolue
Council
à la
a
dimension des
consensus and
dévastations causées
resolute
par les
action
guerres et
commensurate
crises
with the
qui
havoc
ensanglantent
wrought
plusieurs
by
régions de la
wars
planète.
and crises that are bringing
La
bloodshed
force de ce
to several
Conseil
regions of the
réside
planet.
dans son unité.
The strength of this Council
C'est l'unité
resides in
et
its
non la
unity.
fragmentation
It
qui
is
hisse ce
unity and
Conseil
not
à la hauteur de son
fragmentation
mandat
that make
au
this
service des
Council
peuples du monde.
worthy of its mandate,
Nous
working
croyons
for
que
the
la
peoples of the
diplomatie,
world. We
dans ses
believe that
formes les plus
diplomacy
pratiques
in its
et
most
efficientes,
practical and
est à même
efficient
de ramener la
forms
sérénité
is
aux confins
capable
de
of bringing
l'Ukraine.
calm to the
Pour
borders of
terminer, je
Ukraine.
voudrais redonner écho
To
ici
conclude, I
à
would
l'appel
like
lancé
to echo
vendredi dernier
here
par le
the
président
appeal
ukrainien,
made last
exhortant
Friday by
à
the
garder le
Ukrainian
sens de la
president,
mesure et à
asking
ne
for
pas
parties
amplifier
to
la panique.
exercise
Je vous
restraint
remercie,
and to
Madame la
refrain
Présidente.
from whipping up panic. Thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Gabon, and I give the floor to the representative of Brazil.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And let me also thank USG Rosemary DiCarlo for the briefing he has put forward to the Council this morning. Geopolitical tensions and threats to international peace and security require the Security Council to engage promptly and timely. Open references to military actions, unilateral economic sanctions, and other measures are developments that should be avoided under the UN Charter. The Security Council must fulfill its primary objective, which is to prevent war. There is a general and urgent need to resort to meaningful dialogue with and between the parties directly
directly involved in the escalation of tensions. We urge all parties to exercise maximum restraint and to engage constructively in talks aimed at resolving their differences. There is room to restore confidence
and find a lasting diplomatic solution to this crisis. For that, we need political will and genuine commitment from all sides. Brazil encourages all parties to strictly observe international law. It is imperative to apply the principles enshrined in the Charter consistently, in a non-selective manner. The prohibition of use of force, the peaceful resolution of disputes, and the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the protection of human rights are pillars of our collective security system. Brazil also highlights the need for good faith in order to address legitimate security concerns of all parties, including Russia's and Ukraine's. We encourage parties to pursue genuine talks on the implementation of the Minsk agreements. Security Council Resolution 2202, which provided useful guidelines to address the situation in eastern Ukraine, is also a valuable tool in the diplomatic efforts to overcome the situation. Brazil welcomes the resumption of talks in the Normandy format and the renewed commitment to the ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. Despite the sensitive and difficult nature of the issue on our agenda today, I would like to conclude with a note of hope. It has been encouraging to hear, over the past few days, statements to the effect that there is no military solution to the situation. At this moment in particular, this should be the motto of the whole United Nations membership and of the Security Council for a renewed commitment to diplomacy and prevention. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Brazil, and I give the floor to the representative of Kenya.
Thank you, Madam President, for giving me the floor and also for the able way in which you have presided over the Security Council in the month of January. I thank Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing, and I welcome the participation of the representatives of Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, and Poland. Kenya abstained on the procedural vote to hold this meeting. We did so to reflect our contention that the main issue in question here is the impasse between NATO and the Russian Federation. We believe that it is imminently solvable and that the diplomatic steps underway already show promise. This, rather than escalation in search of a winner-take-all outcome, is what is required to support and protect international peace and security. Kenya has always maintained that the respect for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all countries is a cornerstone of global peace. Where there are disputes regarding territorial jurisdiction or security interests, we strongly support patient diplomacy as the first, second, and third options. When the dispute is between major powers and regards the security of a third country, it is imperative that they embrace a spirit of compromise. We believe that the United States, NATO, and the Russian Federation have an opportunity to establish a diplomatic framework that will allow them to resolve their differences. Their security and that of the entire world depends on them willingly taking this step, not in ushering in a new age of containment, provocation, and proxy actions. Compromise is not surrender. The special powers given to the Security Council's permanent members demands that they embrace this principle if the United Nations is not to go the way of the doomed League of Nations. Africa recalls the rejections of compromise and the search for total victory that led to the Cold War. We experienced that Cold War as a series of hot wars and interventions that deeply damaged our dreams for peace, development, and competent, inclusive government. Our internal divisions and fragilities were weaponized at the altar of geopolitical rivalry. It confirmed the truth of the African saying that recognizes, when elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. Madam President, given that the majority of the conflict situations the Security Council deals with are in Africa, we do not want them to serve as surrogates for a new Cold War. We in Africa, therefore, have a direct stake in de-escalation and renewed faith in diplomacy. We have serious challenges to solve together. Rarely has the world more urgently needed a United Nations that can deliver ambitiously. Madam President, Kenya believes that there is still plenty of opportunity for the Normandy format talks, the Trilateral Contact Group on Ukraine, and the direct negotiations between the United States and the Russian Federation to produce a satisfactory outcome. We urge all these parties to ensure that their negotiations respect the security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Faith in innovative diplomacy may also allow for agreements between today's major powers, inspired by the 1975 Helsinki Accords, which did deliver some stability to Europe during the Cold War. This time, however, such agreements need to advance the principle of non-interference to other parts of the world, and particularly to Africa. Madam President, in closing, it is critical that diplomacy and its acceptance of compromise as an inevitable outcome win the day. If there are future discussions to be held in the Security Council on this matter, let it be to announce a new era of cooperation. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Kenya, and I give the floor to the representative of Mexico.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you
señora
very much,
presidenta.
Madam President.
Y gracias a la secretaria general
And
adjunta Di
thank
Carlo
you
por su
to Undersecretary
presentación.
General Di Carlo for
Doy
her
la
briefing.
bienvenida a los
I would like to
representantes de
welcome the
Ucrania,
representatives
Belarus,
of Ukraine, Belarus,
Polonia y
Poland,
Lituania
and
a esta
Lithuania
sesión.
to this meeting.
Señora presidenta,
Madam President,
empiezo por señalar
I'd like to begin by
que mi país
noting
considera oportuna la
that my
celebración de
country
esta reunión
deems the holding of this
en
meeting
apego a nuestros
as
principios
timely,
de
and that in
política
accordance
exterior
with our
y
our
además
foreign policy
pertinente,
principles. In
toda
addition,
vez
we
que el
deem it
Consejo de
relevant
Seguridad
since the Security
debe ser
Council
informado
must be
sobre la
informed
situación
about
que
the
prevalece
prevailing
en Ucrania.
situation in Ukraine.
No está en nuestro
It
interés
is not in our interest
contribuir
to
a polarizar
contribute to
aún más la
further
narrativa.
polarizing the narrative.
Así que me limitaré a
Thus,
señalar
I
lo
will
que para
limit myself
México
to
constituyen
noting what for
principios
Mexico
básicos
should
para
be
abordar el
basic
asunto
principles for the
en
consideration of
cumplimiento
this
con la
matter
Carta de
in
las
accordance
Naciones
with
Unidas.
the United Nations Charter.
Para el caso me referiré
In
a
this
tres
case,
de
I
ellos.
will refer to three of them.
La proscripción de la
The
amenaza o el uso de la
prohibition
fuerza en
on
las
the
relaciones
threat or the use of
internacionales,
force in international
el
relations,
principio de no
the
intervención
principle of
y la
non-intervention,
solución pacífica
and
de
the
las
peaceful
controversias.
settlement of disputes.
Respecto del primero,
On the first principle,
la sola escalada de
the
tensiones en
mere
Europa
escalation
Oriental
of tensions in Eastern
representa
Europe
una amenaza potencial
represents a
para la paz y
potential
la seguridad
threat to
internacionales
international
y por
peace and
tanto
security,
es
and
competencia de
thus
este
it
Consejo
falls within the
de
purview of this
conformidad con
Council
el artículo
pursuant
39
to
de la
Article
Carta.
39 of the Charter.
Por eso mismo,
For this very
y en
reason,
virtud de la desconfianza
and
que
in
prevalece,
light of the prevailing
es
mistrust,
importante tratar
it's
de
important
evitar
to try
cualquier
to
tipo
avoid
de
any type
acción
of
que
action
pueda
that
considerarse
might be
hostil
considered as
por cualquiera
hostile
de las partes
by any of the
y por
parties,
pequeña que
however
parezca.
slight it may seem.
Pero resulta alentador, sin duda,
But it is,
lo que
however,
acabamos de escuchar
encouraging
por parte
to
del
hear what we have just
representante de la
heard
Federación
from
de
the
Rusia.
representative of the Russian Federation.
Ha sido muy claro
He was very
al
clear
reiterar
in
aquí que
reiterating
no
here
hay
that
ninguna
there is
invasión
no
prevista en
planned
Ucrania.
invasion in Ukraine.
Creo que he citado
I
textualmente
think that I
lo que
have
dijo.
cited word for word
Qué
what
bueno
he
que
said.
así sea.
Well,
es una declaración
how good it would be if that is
unilateral
the case.
de no
This is
agresión.
a unilateral statement
Y
of
México
non-aggression. Mexico
junto con lo
maintains,
que ha dicho el secretario
together
general y
with
otros
what has been said
aquí
by
en
the
esta
Secretary
sala,
General and
que
others
no
here in this
existe una
room,
solución
that there
militar
is
en
no
este
military
asunto.
solution in this
Por el
issue.
contrario,
On the contrary,
deben privar la diplomacia
preventive
preventiva
diplomacy
y el diálogo
and
como vías
dialogue
de
should be
distensión,
followed as
y como
means
hemos
to
escuchado,
achieving an
existen de
easing of
hecho para
tensions,
ello
and
diversos
there are to
canales,
that end various
las
channels,
conversaciones en Ginebra,
the
el
conversations in
grupo
Geneva,
trilateral de
the trilateral
contacto
contact group,
y el formato de
and
Normandía.
the Normandy format.
En cuanto a la no intervención,
On non-intervention,
reiteramos la
we
importancia de
reiterate the
respetar la
importance of
soberanía, la
respecting
unidad
the
y la
sovereignty,
integridad
unity, and
territorial de
territorial
Ucrania
integrity of Ukraine
en apego
in
irrestricto
full
al derecho
adherence
internacional,
to
a
international
la Carta de
law,
la ONU
the United
y a la
Nations Charter,
Resolución
and Resolution
2625 de la Asamblea
2625 of the
General.
General Assembly.
Corresponde asimismo a
Hence,
este
it falls to
Consejo de
this Security
Seguridad
Council
determinar en su
to
caso
determine as
la
applicable
existencia
the
de un acto de
existence of an
agresión
act of aggression
conforme a la
in
Resolución
accordance with
3314
General
de
Assembly
la Asamblea General.
Resolution
A lo
3314.
anteriormente dicho,
Added
se
to what I have
refuerza
just stated,
con el
this
principio de
principle
la
is further
solución pacífica de las
bolstered by the
controversias.
principle of the peaceful
Los
settlement of
estados
disputes.
tienen el deber de resolver
States
sus
have the
controversias
duty to
por
settle
medios
their
pacíficos,
disputes by peaceful
como lo
means,
establece el
as
derecho
established in
internacional.
international law.
México ha
Mexico
defendido,
has
defiende y
upheld,
continuará
upholds, and
defendiendo
will
la
continue
diplomacia
to
por
uphold
encima de la
diplomacy
fuerza.
above force.
Y las vías diplomáticas para el caso que nos ocupa
For
siguen
this particular
abiertas,
case
no
remain
se han
open. They
agotado.
have not been exhausted.
Señora
Madam
Presidenta,
President,
lo que no debe ponerse en duda
where there is no
es la
doubt is
responsabilidad
with
de
regard
este
to the
Consejo para
responsibility
cumplir
of
con
this
sus tareas
Council
preventivas,
to make its
para
due
estar a la
preventive
altura que las
efforts to
circunstancias
act
le exigen.
as warranted
Y creo
by these
firmemente
circumstances. And
que
I
al celebrar
firmly
esta
believe that in
sesión
holding this
lo estamos
meeting,
haciendo.
we are doing that.
Estamos cumpliendo con
We
nuestro
are
mandato
complying with
sin
our
excesos
mandate
ni
without
omisiones.
excess
Muchas
nor
gracias,
omission.
Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Mexico, and I give the floor to the representative of the United Arab Emirates.
شكرا السيدة الرئيسة. أود بداية
Thank you, Madam
أن أشكر
President.
السيدة روزماري
At the
ديكارلو
outset,
وكيل
I would
الأمين
like to
العام
thank
للشؤون
Rosemary
السياسية
DiCarlo,
وبناء
Undersecretary
السلام
General
على
for
الإحاطة
Political and
الوافية.
Peacebuilding Affairs, for
السيدة
her
الرئيسة
informative
تتابع
briefing.
دولة
Madam
الإمارات
President, the
التطورات
UAE is
الأخيرة
closely
عنها.
monitoring
وفي
recent
سياق
developments.
مناقشتنا
In the
اليوم
context
نود
of our
التركيز
discussion
على
today, I would
الجوانب
like to
التالية.
focus on the following aspects.
أولاً
First,
تؤمن بلادي إيمانا
the
راسخا
UAE
بأن
firmly
الخلاف
believes that the
القائم في
dispute in
أوروبا
Europe
يتطلب
requires
الانخراط
various
في
countries in the
حوار
region to
جدي
engage
مبني
in
على
a
قيم
serious dialogue
الاستقرار
based on the
والتعايش
values
والسلام
of stability,
بين مختلف
coexistence,
دول
and
المنطقة.
peace.
ونؤكد على أهمية
We stress
التوصل
the
إلى حل
importance of reaching a
تفاوضي
negotiated
للمسألة من
solution
خلال
to this
الآليات
issue through the
المتوفرة
available
وبدعم
mechanisms
المنظمات
and with the support
الإقليمية.
of regional
ونشير
organizations.
هنا
We
إلى
refer here
محادثات
to the
هيئة
Normandy
نورماندي
format talks
ومبادرة
and the
رئيس
initiative
منظمة
of
الأمن
the chair
والتعاون
of
في
the
أوروبا
Organization for
والتي
Security and
تهدف
Cooperation in
لبدء
Europe
حوار
that
جوهري
aims to
بشأن
initiate a
الأمن
substantive
الأوروبي.
dialogue on European security
والذي من شأنه أن يعالج
to
المشاغل
address the
الأمنية
security concerns of its
لدول
members.
المنطقة. ونرحب
We also welcome President
التي
Volodymyr
أطلقها الرئيس
Zelensky's
الأوكراني
appeal
فلوديمير
for
زيلينسكي
calm,
حول إبداء الهدوء ونأمل أن
and we
يتم
hope to
البناء
build on it
عليها
to further
لبناء
build
المزيد من
confidence in
الثقة
the
في
region.
المنطقة. ثانياً
Second,
ترحب بلادي
the
بالإعلان
UAE
الصادر
welcomes the
عن اجتماع
announcement
هيئة
made in the
نورماندي
Normandy format
بتاريخ
meeting on the
26 يناير
26th of January,
والذي
in
أكد
which the
فيه
Russian
كل من
Federation
الاتحاد
and the
الروسي
Republic of Ukraine
وجمهورية أوكرانيا
confirmed
عزمهما
their
على
intention to
تنفيذ وقف
implement
غير
an
مشروط
unconditional
لإطلاق النار
ceasefire
في
in
شرق
eastern
أوكرانيا.
Ukraine.
ونعول على
We are
المبادرات
counting on the
المختلفة
various
الجارية
initiatives
حالياً
currently underway
لإتاحة
to
الفرصة
allow for
للحوار
dialogue,
بما في ذلك
including
بين
between
الولايات
the United
المتحدة
States and the
والاتحاد
Russian
الروسي
Federation,
حيث يجب
whose
مساندة
existing
الجهود
diplomatic
الدبلوماسية
efforts must be
القائمة
supported
وإعطائها
and given space to achieve the desired results. The UAE also stresses the importance of maintaining security and stability, as well as the central importance of the Minsk agreements and the need to adhere to them and ensure their implementation. This will contribute to reaching a comprehensive regional understanding that maintains the security and stability of the concerned concerned countries and addresses all their legitimate concerns. Third, escalation must be avoided as it could have a negative impact on civilians and exacerbate the fragile humanitarian situation in eastern Ukraine. In this spirit, we stress the importance of considering the humanitarian needs of civilians and of preventing the deterioration of the humanitarian situation in the region. Fourth, respect for and adherence to international law is essential to ensure that the situation in Eastern Europe does not deteriorate further. We also stress the importance of these principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and good neighborliness, which are indispensable for the maintenance of international peace and security. Finally, Madam President, the UAE reiterates the importance of constructive dialogue to resolve differences. The role of the Security Council as the body responsible for maintaining international peace and security is essential to provide a diplomatic platform that enables states to present and resolve their differences peacefully. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Arab Emirates. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as representative of Norway. Let me start by expressing Norway's strong support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. This includes the Crimean Peninsula and its territorial waters. Norway is deeply concerned about the Russian large-scale military buildup near the Ukraine's border and in occupied Crimea. This is unprovoked and unjustified. Further escalation can have devastating humanitarian consequences. Through its harsh statement and unrealistic demands, Russia now challenges the security architecture in all of Europe. The crisis therefore not only affects the region, but represents a clear threat to international peace and security. Russia has repeatedly accused NATO of increasing tensions. I would like to underline that the alliance is defensive and voluntary. We do not seek confrontation. At the same time, we cannot and will not compromise on the principles on which the security in Europe rests. We stand ready to discuss security concerns. Norway supports the European Security Order based on international law and national sovereignty. We cannot allow this to be replaced by spheres of influence. Every country has the right to freely choose its security alignment. We call on Russia to de-escalate and to engage constructively in dialogue through the established international mechanisms in good faith. Furthermore, Norway underlines its support for the existing international frameworks for the sustainable and peaceful resolution of conflicts in accordance with international law. Russia has itself repeatedly invoked in many other Council discussions the principles of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Norway calls on Russia to now respect these principles when it comes to Ukraine. Thank you. I shall now give the floor to the representative of the United States, who has asked for the floor to make a further statement.
Good. Thank you, Madam President. I can't say that I am surprised by my Russian colleagues' comments, but I am disappointed. Madam President, I cannot let the false equivalency go unchecked, so I feel I must respond. Let me be clear, there are no plans to weaken Russia, as claimed by our Russian colleague today. On the contrary, we welcome Russia as a responsible member of the international community, but its actions on the border of Ukraine are not responsible. The threats of aggression on the border of Ukraine, yes, on its border, is provocative. Our recognition of the facts on the ground is not provocative. The threats of action, if Russia's security demands aren't met, is provocative. Our encouraging diplomacy is not provocative. The provocations from Russia, not from us or other members of this Council. We have made clear our commitment to the path of diplomacy. I hope our Russian colleagues will also choose this path and engage peacefully with the international community, including Ukraine. I say to Russia simply this: your actions will speak for themselves, and we hope and encourage that you make the right choices before this Council today. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the United States. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation who has asked for the floor to make further
Благодарю вас, господин председатель. Я не планирую превращать наше заседание в диалог между Россией и Соединенными Штатами. Мы все, что хотели, сказали в нашем сегодняшнем выступлении. Однако мы по-прежнему искренне не понимаем, о каких угрозах, провокациях, эскалациях со стороны России идет речь и что нам меняется. Но да ладно, я высказался по этому поводу выступления. Я хотел бы обратить внимание, что когда я слушал выступление представителей Соединенных Штатов, как мне показалось, я не услышал ни одного упоминания, ни одной ссылки на Минские соглашения, на резолюцию Совета Безопасности 2202. И это, кстати говоря, очень показательно. Вот в таком контексте мы должны говорить об регулировании украинского кризиса. А Соединенные Штаты уводят эту тему совершенно в другую область. И, наконец, госпожа председатель, я хочу извиниться перед членами Совета и не воспринимать мой уход как демарш. Те страны, которые будут выступать после того, как предоставить им слово, я иду на встречу с генеральным секретарем в преддверии нашего председательства в Совете, который начинается завтра. И, к сожалению, не могу перенести ее в связи с графиком генерального секретаря.
So I can't change this situation because of the SG's timetable, so I'm going to have to leave. I do apologize. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation. I wish now then to again remind all speakers to limit their statement to no more than 5 minutes in order to enable the Council to carry out this work expeditiously. I now give the floor to the representative of Ukraine.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I would like immediately to apologize that I may not be within the 5-minute limits, especially given the length of the Russian intervention. I would like to express my gratitude to the Norwegian presidency for calling this briefing of the Security Council, of the need of which I spoke exactly a fortnight ago with Her Excellency Foreign Minister of Norway during our meeting here in New York. I express our thanks to the US, who as a member of the Security Council, in close coordination with Ukraine and partners, requested today's briefing. And of course, I express our appreciation of the presentation by Undersecretary Di Carlo. It's a duty and need for the Security Council to be fully informed in case of grave threats to international peace and security. What is going on along the border with Ukraine, where the Russian Federation continues its military buildup, falls under the above qualification. It is important that Ukraine's vote is heard today in the Security Council and is not lost in translation when the position of my country has been delivered by a foreign ambassador in the Russian language. I would ask the deputy of Vasily Alexeyevich to tell him that my leadership speaks its language, has its own ambassadors and spokespersons. So there is no need to interpret the words of Ukrainian officials in a foreign language, especially if it is done the way Humpty Dumpty, Shaltai Baltai, spoke of the meaning of the words. Even if Lewis Carroll appears to be a favorite writer of the Russian top diplomats. Against the backdrop of unprecedented sequence of high-level diplomatic contacts in the past few weeks, a serious talk in the Security Council is required more than ever to present facts, to listen to each other's positions and concerns, as well as to outline further actions towards the escalation. The fact is that nowadays about 112,000 Russian troops have been amassed around Ukraine's borders and in Crimea. And together with the maritime and aviation components, their number reaches about 130,000. Another fact is that the Russian troops are also being deployed to Belarus for the Union Resolve 2022 joint drills to be held on 10 to 20th February. They include, in particular, Iskander missile divisions, S-400 Triumph and Panzer anti-aircraft systems, Sukhoi 35 Generation 4++ fighters. On top of that, on 26 January, the Russian fleet started another military drill in the Black Sea with involvement of frigates, patrol ships, missile ships, assault landing ships, and minesweepers. This reminds us of the ongoing heavy militarization of the temporarily occupied Crimea, the Black Sea, and the Sea of Azov by Russia, which poses a serious threat to Ukraine, all littoral states, and their wider region. Significant reinforcement of combat capabilities of the Russian occupation forces in Donbass is another worrying trend. Currently, these formations consist of up to 35,000 personnel, including around 3,000 servicemen of the Russian armed forces on command posts and in other critical combat positions. In the border areas outside government-controlled illegal border crossings by cargo trains and truck convoys delivering armed supplies to the Russian armed formations in Donbass is a routine practice. OSCE SMM reports provide ample evidence of various illegal activities in the border areas. No surprise, the restrictions of the OSCE SMM freedom of movement are on the increase, in particular in non-government controlled areas close to the Ukraine-Russia border. On the 22nd December 2021, the Trilateral Contact Group reached another understanding on resuming the ceasefire regime. Nevertheless, shootings, shellings, sniper fire on Ukrainian positions, and systematic use of attack UAVs against Ukrainian troops have not stopped. We have lost 12 servicemen killed in action and 14 wounded since 22nd December 2021. Just a few days ago, on January 25, armed formations of the Russian Federation once again attacked the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the area of Pishevik, Donetsk region, using an attack UAV. VOG-17 fragmentation grenades dropped from the UAV resulted in severe injuries to 2 Ukrainian servicemen. The current impasse in the consultations process within the framework of the TCG continues on practically all tracks. While the decisions adopted by the Normandy format leaders during their December 2019 summit in Paris remain unimplemented. Over the past year and a half, we have seen deliberate efforts by the Russian side to obstruct TCG activities and even to prevent finalization of the already agreed, including at the expert level, arrangements within TCG in the security and humanitarian areas. All this is accompanied by Russia's stubborn denial of being a party to the armed conflict that has been raging for 8 years now in the Donbas region of Ukraine, attempts to impose a so-called direct dialogue with these puppet occupation administrations, as well as refusal to engage in substantive discussion on political settlement of the conflict. The question is why all these Russian forces are there. We have asked this question on different fora, along with sending own clear messages. Ukraine is not going to launch military offensive neither in Donbass, nor in Crimea, nor anywhere else. Ukraine sees no alternative to peaceful resolution of the ongoing conflict and restoration of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Yet we also see a surge in Russian disinformation campaign, including false accusations of Ukraine plotting a military attack. This is not going to happen. This is direct evidence of Russia's unwillingness to de-escalate and prepare to justify its possible further aggression. We are well aware of Russia's history of ploys and provocations, and we will do everything possible to prevent another Manila-type provocation by Russia. Once again, I have clear instructions from my government to reiterate today the absence of any aggressive intention, as well as Ukraine's strong commitment to peace. Today we have heard from the Russian side that they do not intend to launch a war against my country, although one should rather speak about to launch a new phase of the Russian aggression. It is a very important message, as we still lack credible explanations by Russia of its actions and military movements. Based on experience, we cannot believe Russian declarations, but only practical moves on withdrawal of troops from the border. Madam President, Ukraine strongly rejects any attempt to use the threat of force as an instrument of pressure to make Ukraine and our partners accept illegitimate demands. There is no room for compromise on principal issues. The most principal position for Ukraine is that we have inherent sovereign right to choose our own security arrangements, including treaties of alliance which cannot be questioned by Russia. Moreover, this right is enshrined in many international legal instruments that Russia itself is a party to. Ukraine will not bow to threats aimed at weakening Ukraine, undermining its economic and financial stability, and inciting public frustration. This will not happen, and the Kremlin must remember that Ukraine is ready to defend itself. At the same time, we support the need to keep diplomatic channels with Russia open, if that prevents a shift to military tools. My president has reiterated most recently that he is ready to meet his Russian counterpart. If Russia has any questions to Ukraine, it is better to meet and talk, not to bring troops to the Ukrainian borders and intimidate Ukrainian people. For Ukraine, the first priority today is to achieve a sustainable and unconditional ceasefire in Donbass. The ceasefire regime must be guaranteed, reliable, and on this basis, further steps can be taken. Intensification of the work of the Normandy format, including at the level of leaders of the four countries, is an important prerequisite for next steps towards lasting peace in Donbass. And we are ready to resume Normandy 4 talks in all formats. The recent political advisors meeting on 26 January in Paris, despite many differences, gives a hope for a continuation of the negotiation process, which Ukraine will staunchly support. Madam President, we consider that despite the Russian attempt to impede the briefing from being held, the Security Council and the wider UN membership have received today a very important information that the members of the Security Council need to take an informed decision when appropriate to act swiftly and decisively in employing preventive diplomacy under the Chapter 6 of the UN Charter that rests on the Security Council responsibility to investigate any dispute or any situation which might lead to international friction or give rise to a dispute. After listening to the Russian ambassador today, I would like to ask how long Russia will pursue a clear attempt to push Ukraine and its partners into a Kafka trap. And still, I perhaps should acknowledge that it was important to hear the Russian envoy today, and yet I must end with what my foreign minister has recently said, and I quote, "If Russian officials are serious when they say they don't want a new war, Russia must continue diplomatic engagement and pull back military forces it amassed along Ukraine's borders, and in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Diplomacy is the only responsible way, end of quote. Let's judge by actions, not by riddles and semantic puzzles. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of Ukraine, and I give the floor to the representative of Belarus.
Благодарю вас, госпожа
Thank you,
председатель.
Madam President.
Республика Беларусь
The Republic of
продолжает
Belarus
занимать
is continuing
последовательную
to
и
uphold its
принципиальную
consistent
позицию
and
о
principled
неприемлемости
position
решения
on the
любого
unacceptable nature
конфликта
of resolving
силовым
any
путем.
conflict by force.
Приложив
We have
немало
made
усилий
significant
для
efforts to
урегулирования
settle the
конфликта на
conflict
Украине,
in
наша
Ukraine.
страна
Our
по-прежнему
country
готова
is still
сделать все
prepared
возможное
to do
для
everything possible
восстановления
to restore
диалога
dialogue
и
and mutual
взаимопонимания в
understanding in the
регионе.
region.
Альтернатива
There is
Минским
no
договоренностям,
alternative to the Minsk
сыгравшим
agreements
ключевую роль
playing
в
a
мирном
key role
разрешении
in the
кризиса,
peaceful settlement
нет.
of the crisis.
Переговорный
The
процесс в
negotiation
рамках
process
трехсторонней
as part of
контактной
the
группы,
trilateral
а
contact
также
group,
практическая
and also the
реализация
practical
договоренностей
implementation
в
of the
зоне
agreements in the
внутриукраинского
conflict
конфликта
zone of the
позволят вывести
domestic
мирный
Ukrainian
процесс по
conflict will
Украине на
enable the peace
устойчивую
process in
положительную
Ukraine to get on a
траекторию.
sustainable, positive track.
Внесение сегодняшней
The
темы
US
делегации
delegation
США на
proposing
рассмотрение
today's
Совета
topic for
Безопасности ООН
consideration in the
представляет
Security
собой
Council is
очередную
yet
попытку
another
искусственного
attempt to
нагнетания
artificially whip
напряженности в
up
регионе
tension in the
исключительно в
region
качестве
purely
инструмента политических
as an instrument of
обвинений.
political accusations.
Подобные действия лишь
Such
усиливают
actions
недоверие
only
и
heighten
никоим
mistrust
образом не
and in no
способствуют
way
снятию
help
разногласий.
to solve disagreements.
Несмотря на
Despite the
озабоченность,
concerns
высказываемую
expressed
неоднократно представителями
frequently by
Республики Беларусь
representatives
на
of the Republic of
международных
Belarus
переговорных площадках
at
и в ходе
international
двусторонних
fora,
контактах,
negotiating fora
наращивание
during bilateral
военных
contacts,
сил у
the
наших
expansion of
западных и
military
южных границ не
powers
только не
on our western
прекращается,
and
но и
southern borders not
приобретает
only is not
угрожающий
ceasing,
характер.
but rather it's becoming threatening
Несмотря
in
на
nature,
неоднократные призывы к
despite
диалогу
our
и
consistent calls
сотрудничеству,
for
в том
dialogue and
числе и в
cooperation,
сфере контроля над
including
вооружениями,
regarding arms
давление на нашу
control.
страну со
In
стороны
fact, even
отдельных
more
государств
pressure is
лишь
being exerted on our
усиливается.
country by individual
Предложения о
countries.
возвращении
Our
к переговорам
proposals
не
to
находят
return
отклика
to
у наших
negotiations are not being
западных
responded
партнеров.
to by our Western
Я, кстати,
partners.
хотел бы обратить
Incidentally,
внимание,
I'd
что
like to draw
сегодня
your
здесь, в
attention
этом
to the
зале,
fact that
звучали
here
ссылки на
we heard a
Будапештский
reference to the
меморандум.
Budapest
Я
Memorandum.
очень прошу вас
I
перечитать этот
do
документ
really urge you to read that
относительно
document
Республики Беларусь
regarding the
и
Republic of Belarus,
обратить
and
внимание
I would
на
draw your
обещания,
attention to the
содержащиеся в этом
promises
документе,
in that
не
document
оказывать на
not
Беларусь
to
меры экономического принуждения
exert
и при
any
этом
coercive
вспомнить
economic measures
те
on Belarus,
пакеты,
and to
многочисленные
remember
пакеты
the
экономических
numerous
санкций,
packages
которые
of
со
economic
стороны отдельных
sanctions
государств
from individual
против нас
states
уже
that
были
have been
введены.
imposed against us.
С учетом
Given
сложившейся
the
непростой
current
обстановки,
difficult
главы
situation,
Беларуси
the
и
leaders of Belarus
России
and
приняли
Russia
решение
have
о
taken the
совместном
decision to
проведении
conduct jointly
мероприятий по оценке
activities to
готовности
assess the
вооруженных сил
preparedness
двух
of the armed
государств
forces of the two
обеспечить
states
военную
to
безопасность с
provide
учетом
military
обязательств
security, given the
военно-политического союза.
commitments of our
В
military
рамках
political
указанных
alliance.
договоренностей
As
принято
part of
решение
these
о проведении
agreements,
в
a decision
феврале
has been taken
текущего
in
года
February this year to
проверки сил
conduct
реагирования
a verification
союзного
of
государства.
the
Главными целями проверки
responsiveness
вооруженных
of
сил
our
являются
forces of our
оценка
alliance.
готовности и
The main
способности
aims
органов
of
военного
this verification
управления к
of the
совместным
military
действиям
forces is
по
to assess the
обеспечению
preparedness and
безопасности
capability of our
союзного
military
государства.
command and control, to
Отработка
conduct joint
совместных действий
exercises
по
to guarantee
нейтрализации
security of
угроз
our
на
allied
границах
states,
союзного государства,
to
вызванных
develop
в том
joint
числе
measures to
миграционным
eradicate the
кризисом
threat
и
on the borders of
необходимостью
our allied
стабилизации
state,
гуманитарной
including
обстановки.
caused by the migration crisis
Организация
and the need
обороны
to
и
stabilize the
охраны
humanitarian
стратегически
situation,
важных объектов,
organizing the defense and protection
пресечение
of
и
strategically
отражение
important
внешней агрессии
facilities,
в ходе
to curb
оборонительных
and ward off
операций,
external acts of aggression
противодействие
during
терроризму и
defensive
защиты
operations,
интересов
and to combat
союзного
terrorism
государства.
and protect the interests
На
of
завершающем
our
этапе
state
мероприятий в
alliance.
период
At the
с 10
final
по
stage
20
of these
февраля
activities,
текущего года
from the 10th to
пройдут
the 20th of
совместные
February this year,
белорусско-российские
there will
учения
be a
«Союзная
joint
решимость
Belarusian-Russian
2022»,
exercises
в ходе
called
которых будут
Allied
выполнены
Resolve
совместные учебные контрольно-боевые задачи с использованием контрольных целей. Мы отмечаем, что указанные варианты применения региональной группировки войск в целях обеспечения военной безопасности союзного государства отрабатываются нами двумя государствами регулярно в ходе совместных учений. Всегда носят исключительно оборонительный характер и не несут никакой угрозы ни для европейских партнеров, ни для соседних стран. Республика Беларусь продолжает неукоснительно соблюдать все взятые на себя обязательства в рамках международных и региональных договоров по контролю над вооружениями. Кстати говоря, вся информация о предстоящих военных учениях содержится в полном объеме на официальном сайте Министерства обороны Республики Беларусь. Несколько дней назад, 28 января, президент Республики Беларусь Александр Лукашенко, отвечая на вопросы, заявил, что война возможно лишь в двух случаях: при нападении на Беларусь, либо при нападении на нашего союзника Российскую Федерацию. Реагируя на различные инсинуации в адрес Беларуси в преломлении к внутриукраинской ситуации, хотим еще раз напомнить, что мы готовы и далее оказывать все необходимое содействие в урегулировании конфликта на Украине, в том числе путем создания всех необходимых условий для деятельности трехсторонней контактной группы, а также для переговоров в любых иных возможных форматах и вариантах. Сегодня многие в мире говорят о необходимости проведения широкого диалога по вопросам международной безопасности с инициативой проведения